Good morning. Welcome to Viking Preparedness. I am Pastor Joe Fox. Welcome to my coffee deck. What do I title what I'm going to talk about today? See, that's the problem. I try to give you a good background to look at, and then it makes me look dark. Not that you care, right? I mean, I get it. This could be a podcast the way most of my videos go. All right. Sustainable agriculture, permaculture principles. I don't know. We'll figure it out as we go along. Food. When I first discovered permaculture, I thought it was really interesting. And somebody downloaded a bunch of podcasts of a guy named Jack Spirko, who had some great ideas. I should look him up. I bet you he's on YouTube. Because I think I got this when YouTube was very early. I used to listen to him while I was working out. I know, right? Some people listen to metal. I'd listen to a guy talking about permaculture. Whatever works. But I was fascinated with it, and so I delved into permaculture a little bit, and what I determined. Anybody here a permaculturist? I think it's kind of cult-like. I think that there's a lot of good stuff in permaculture, but some of these people are just wow, over the top. Um, I had a woman one time take me to task because she said, "What you're doing is not permaculture. Back to Eden's not permaculture." Yeah, and she was probably technically correct. Permaculture is here I go again talking about permaculture, something I don't know enough about. I am not certified permaculturist, but it's basically a system, right? And I was referring to specific techniques and things. But it seems to me that. So I guess I'm starting negative, but we're going positive with this video. Um, the permaculturists act like they invented everything, like swales. Swales, and this was years ago. I'm sure it has matured as a group. I don't follow them anymore. Swales, they were big into swales, and they had videos on how you could figure out where the contours were in your line with a hose and stuff like that, like it was a permaculture invention. It wasn't. Farmers around here do swales. Farmers in Kansas do swales. It makes sense. It keeps the water from rushing off your field. Stuff like that. And then, you pay to go to permaculture design courses, and you get a permaculture certification so you can give classes on permaculture, blah, blah, whatever, man. Having said that, there are some awesome ideas and techniques that you don't have to use the whole thing to make it work. And to that end, I have several books that are permaculture-y. And a book that I would recommend is called, I'm thinking in my head, do I want to run in there and get it? But I think there'll be too much dead time. It's called Restoration Agriculture. I don't remember who wrote it. It's a pretty good book. I'm pretty sure he's a permaculture type guy. But it's a good book, and I think it came from that book, and I think I may have just talked about this recently also, so it must be important. Pay attention. I guess when the evil white males landed on the eastern seaboard of this continent and started making their way inland, manifest destiny, when they started coming in, the forest, evidently, I mean, this is the story, right? The forest were 90% useful nut trees. Pecans, walnuts, hickory, acorns, the good ones, stuff like that. And supposedly, the Indians, when they identified a little good tree, nut tree coming up, they would kill everything else around it so that it would do well. Or not kill, whatever, give it a good habitat. But basically, they got rid of all the non-useful trees. And so everything in the forest was good for them. Concepts, principles that you can apply where you are. Do the best you can with what you got where you're at. Um, I live on a lot of land. I have a lot of land. A cattle rancher from Texas would not think so. But somebody from Northern Virginia would think so. And we want to make this land as productive. And when I say productive, I mean mostly food, but also good wood, things like that. I'll give you an example where y'all help me. The black locust, which has finally been identified, tree that grows around here. I was chopping them down left and right, getting rid of them. Now I'm a bit circumspect about that. That's a valuable tree. Puts a lot of nitrogen in the soil, and the wood, if it's straight, is very hard and resistant to rot, makes good fence posts and things like that. So I have not been killing them willy-nilly anymore. That's actually thanks to y'all for helping me identify that tree. But we're trying to make the land productive. We're trying to make it so that we can literally just walk out there and pick bananas. We don't have bananas here. Pick bananas from the trees and eat them. You know, everything's useful out there in the forest. And we are so far from that. But we're trying. And an example, hold on, I gotta holler. Kate, what plants did you bring down from Kansas that like wild plants? So my wife, I'm sure it grows in the Ozarks, these plants. I'm sure they do. They do now. But we didn't see any on our land when we first came here. So my wife brought down some useful, edible, wild plants from Kansas. And you got to understand, when we came here, it all looked like that. Not between here and there. Start there and go back. It was just all woods. And so we started out with dozers, right? Coming in and putting our road networks in and clearing spaces for homes and things like that. And it was just down trees and mud strips and openings, right? And so nothing that normally grows in the open, in pasture, if you will, was here, because this had all just been forest, right? So there weren't these plants. So my wife brought down curly dock, which she and I both have talked about in past videos, but it's an edible green, and it gets big, and it's a weed, and we like it. She brought down plantain and planted it. Curly dock, plantain, oh, lamb's quarter. Some people call it goosefoot. We brought that down and planted it. Now, we probably could have waited, and I'm sure they would have sprung up once the sunlight hit the ground and the mud dried and, you know, things started growing. But we wanted that now. And why did we transplant those plants? Because we eat them. And so we want them just growing around wild. And mullein, I don't know if we transplanted that, but we have it down here now. We had it in Kansas. I don't think we did transplant. I think it just started growing. But when it grows in certain places, I let it grow. Like I mow around it or we weed around it or whatever, because that's a useful plant. And I'm not trying to turn this into a, you can look up mullein yourself, M-U-L-L-E-I-N or something, and see what it's good for. But the fact is that we nurtured, sometimes transplanted these wild plants and then let them go, and they've taken off now. Another thing I did, I really like, and I talked about this recently, excuse me, it's early. I talked about this recently, staghorn sumac. It makes the big red berries that are chock full of vitamin C. Vitamin C, lack thereof, is a potential problem in a grid down situation, especially in winter. I have tried 2 or 3 times, I think 3 times here, to plant pine trees. You know, just longleaf pines, you know, pine needles coming out. We have none on our land. And I just want one tree to take. And I did little slips. I bought some pine trees. I went to a friend's house in Missouri and dug up like 3 of them. I guess I have tried at least 3 times. Dug up like 3 of them, brought them back here and transplanted them. They all die. The reason I want at least one long needle pine tree, white pine, I think it's called, is because, oh, and they grow 5 miles from here. There's a whole mountaintop covered with them. It's because they're chock full of vitamin C. And I'm looking for a long-term source of vitamin C in the winter. So just one tree would do it. So I'll keep trying to plant a pine tree. Um, but I planted these sumacs, transplanted them. They grow around here, just not on Shofar Mountain. And so I went one fall or late summer, I can't remember exactly, picked all these seed heads, and I just went around scattering them all over the mountain. We have a lot of them now. Unfortunately, they got into our berry patch, and they're kind of competing with the blackberries. And so we need to cut them out of there. I want my one blackberry row to just be blackberries. Again, they just grew up, and then we nurtured them, and we kind of kill everything else that's competing with them. And so then we have this huge strip of blackberries. We also have blackberries in other places, but our primary blackberry row is that. Again, natural food that we're just taking care of. We have persimmon trees here that I have not done enough to take care of. The deer love them. They love them to the point, some of these trees would probably be 10 feet tall if the deer hadn't stomped them down, and now they're growing at an angle near the ground so that the deer can eat the persimmons when they come out. We have started, only just started, identifying certain trees where they are. We know where several hickory trees are, like we can walk right to them in the woods. And our plan there is, if times ever get really hard, because right about now is when the hickories are dropping, the nuts are dropping. We figure we'll just put tarps, like blue tarps probably, underneath the trees, and every morning and afternoon send kids down there to, with adequate security, to gather the nuts, right, off the tarp into baskets and bring them back, and then we'll deal with them that way to get the food from them. I identified a tree called a black haw. Again, I did that on YouTube. I didn't know what it was. It tasted good. I got crazy comments on that video, but it ends up, it's called a black haw, and it looks kind of like a blueberry tree. The fruit does, and the fruit's not any good until after the first frost, and then it's pretty good. They used to plant it in America for making preserves and pies and things like that. And we have 2 of them that I've identified on the property. And so we know where they are, and we kind of keep things. And, you know, we have hackberries and wild cherries and wild plums. And again, we try to keep those trees happy, right? So what am I telling you? PJ, I only live on a 1/4 acre lot. Okay. What are you doing on your 1/4 acre lot? Some of that wild stuff that you're throwing weed and feed on, you could eat. Some of the natural things out there you could transplant from place A to place B on your place and have it. Or you could start taking walks in the park. I remember when we lived in suburbia, we would walk in the parks. And when I say parks, in Northern Virginia, they have a really good series of parks, and they look like that, with trails going through them. They're really nice. And then little fields and meadows, and they're nice. They're not like a manicured lawn park. And you can find a lot of stuff out there, and you can identify stuff in your area that you may be able to eat when times get hard and Walmart runs out of canned veggies. All right? Our Walmart here is fine. Go figure. So working with nature, identifying what's out there, enhancing it a little bit to the degree that you can, giving it a good environment to live in, not working against it. I think permaculture has some really good principles that you could apply, but I think, like anything, we probably shouldn't go, well, don't go crazy like some of the people I know that are crazy. It is like their life, permaculture. Growing food is good. There's more ways to grow food than permaculture. There is. It is not the be-all, end-all. And yeah, I don't think Back to Eden method is a permaculture method. It works really good and it's helpful to the environment. And if you haven't seen Back to Eden Garden by Paul Gauchi, which is spelled weird, you'll have to look that up yourself, G-A-U something. You can find the video online free. And I think it's a 45 minute video. You might have to like Google Back to Eden Garden, find Paul Gauchi's site, go there and watch it. I did that. I watched it about 3 times, 2 times online, and I'm like, at the time it was a $15 DVD. I sent the money in it and got it, and I've watched it several times since. Guy's onto something. Works really well. It worked in this horrible soil. But so do other things. I get that. And again, you have to, well, my fingernails are dirty. You dirty fingernails. You have to apply what works for you in your area. And the only way you're gonna know what that is by doing it. Watching all the cool videos in the world on raised beds isn't gonna make you a good gardener if you haven't tried one. Some places raised beds are not good. They use a lot more water in a raised bed than a bed in the ground. Some places maybe Back to Eden wouldn't work. You know, Pastor Joe's always talking about Back to Eden. There he is, referring to himself in the third person. That means he's crazy. But I refer to Back to Eden a lot because it works for us, and it worked for us in Kansas. Raised beds worked for us great in Washington State, where there's a lot of water. But you have to find what works for you. So do your research, but hey, here comes a good segue. You're gonna have to get dirt underneath your fingernails to make it work, right? All right, food. It's not just storing up corn for nixtamalization. By the way, if you didn't see it, Kevin Musak, thank you, personal thank you. I knew somebody would, and I should have figured it would be him. Figured out how much lime, calcium hydroxide you need per corn, and did the math on it. And feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, but it's basically 10 to 1. You have 10 buckets of corn, you need 1 bucket of calcium hydroxide. Nixtamalization, it's important. Somebody wrote, I guess it was here because this is where the video is. Oh, this food storage is turning into rocket science. Sounded like you were getting depressed. Store food. You'll figure it out as you go. It's better to have food and not have it figured all out than not have food while you're trying to figure it out when you need it. It's like, how am I gonna grind all my wheat? Oh no, I've gotta buy a $400 grain mill. No, you don't. You could actually use a brick on your front stoop sidewalk there and grind the wheat if you needed to. Buy the wheat. And then somebody I saw comment too said something about field corn is better for you than deer corn. What are you talking about? It's the same thing. And actually, deer corn's been processed and cleaned more. You have all the chaff out. So that's another thing. It's the same. And then somebody else said they hate buying field corn because they have to get all the chaff out before they package it. And that's a pain in the neck. Yes, that would be. I don't. I package my field corn. It comes with little bits of stem, sometimes even a rock or two, or because it's just the combine going through there, blowing it in there, and then they blow it into bags. I package it as is, and then I winnow it as needed. So when we're gonna make cornmeal, I get out the appropriate amount of corn. I have we got it in Asia for winnowing. A big flat, you could use a tray, but we have a big round thing, and I pour it in there and I just go whoosh, 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 where it's windy and the wind blows all the chaff away, and if there's a rock you see it bounce around, you pull it out. Now I have clean corn, and then I process it. I have not yet done the nixtamalization, but I'm going to. It's going to be fun. We're looking forward to it. I think I'm going to use my poki for it. Poiki, my African pot. And that just got me thinking. I guess I'm on a little roll here, but it's all food related. I was telling my wife we need to get some big pots so that we can nixtamalization. I know, right? A new word, a new concept. You never knew until you watched Viking Preparedness. Maybe you did. Um, but so that we can do that for the group, right? And so we're on the lookout for some pots. She wants to go to this restaurant supply place, get some industrial grade big pots. Um, Reminds me, and then I guess I'll close with this. My people called themselves Pennsylvania Dutch. My mother thought they were from the Netherlands. God bless her soul. They all spoke this bastardized German, and my mom even spoke it. It's called Pennsylvania Dutch, and didn't realize it was German until I started taking German in high school, and then oh, they're not Dutch, they're Deutsch, Pennsylvania Deutsch, and they just said Dutch, and people didn't like Germans in this country twice, and so it was good to say we're Dutch. Um, be that as it may, back in the 70s, which for some of you was a long time ago, and some of you not so much. We used to have the family reunion on my mom's side. Man, I wish I'd taken pictures, but I was in like six, seven. Well, sometimes I was in grade school, but you know, middle school's the ones I remember. And we would show up at a park. For those of you in the know, Hershey Park in Pennsylvania, they'd rent the whole park. And they would have these little old ladies dressed in the old way, and they weren't wearing a costume. This is what they wore. They had like these long skirts or dresses on. They had their hair in like this bonnet thing. They weren't Amish. It wasn't that kind of bonnet. It was more of a thing, kind of like Sister Kate wears. They had these big aprons on, and they had these big tripods, maybe 4 of them out there with fires underneath them, and these huge cauldrons and these big wooden paddles that they would be cooking bean soup from early in the morning until in the afternoon, and you could just go there and they'd give you bean soup. And of course the adults were doing a lot of drinking because it's that part of Pennsylvania. But I just remember the smell of the wood smoke, the ladies out there cooking these huge pots to feed this huge group of people. Delicious bean soup. And then I think about that from a grid down group scenario, and it's like, yeah, you could have somebody working on a big pot of bean soup, and the people can come in and get their food and, go about their day. All right. Hey, I hope there was something in there useful for you. Think about what you have available. Identify food sources. Pick some and eat it so you get used to it and you learn, and it's not a thing anymore. And think about taking care of the forest wherever it is, or fields, or whatever you have nature. And no, I'm not getting into a nature thing like that. But think about taking care of what the good Lord provided, so that it provides for you. All right, I'll see you out there.